Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, the United States, sadly, has reached a milestone here of 500,000 COVID-related deaths since their first recorded death last year in 2020. Johnson&Johnson is also in the works of developing or releasing their one-shot vaccine and hoping to get FDA approval for that, as well as some Syrian airstrikes that have been taking place over in the Middle East, a little bit of tit for tat there between the United States and Syria. And also we're going to look at some things between Syria and Israel as well. But we're going to start it off here with just over a year, after we mentioned, after the United States recorded its first death related to COVID-19. 500,000 people have died so far to date. Well, at the National Cathedral, bells tolled 500 times. President Biden marked the milestone from the White House, and he said in a speech, "The people we lost were extraordinary. They span generations, born in America, immigrated to America, and just like that, so many of them took their final breath alone, dying in America. As a nation, we can't accept such a cruel fate. While fighting the pandemic for so long, we have to resist becoming numb to the sorrow."
Well, Dr. Fauci said that we're still not out of it yet. 500,000 deaths is historical, and we haven't seen anything close to this. Now, the recent winter storm stalled vaccination attempts, but so far, about 80% of the available doses have been administered. Health officials say they hope to be back on track, vaccinating about 1.8 million people per day. Now, while hospitalizations remain high, the most of any country in the world, they are starting to decline.
White House officials expect to reach the president's goal of vaccinating 100 million people in his first 100 days in office. But before those who've already lost loved ones, that goal might be a little bit too late for them, and of course bring no consolation in regards to the losses that they've already suffered.
Well, New York City researchers have discovered a new variant of coronavirus, and it is spreading quickly. Dr. Fauci said that the best way to protect Americans is to get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. But the current vaccines might not even be effective against the variants. Now, the FDA said that Pfizer's vaccine no longer has to be stored at those sub-zero temperatures, creating a big breakthrough for vaccinations, making it easier to get the shot to distribution centers across the U.S. Now, both Pfizer and Moderna have said that they're working on a booster shot, which could mean a third dose in the future because, as you mentioned earlier, these are two-part. Johnson&Johnson is working on a single-dose vaccine, but the booster would be actually the third shot then.
That's right, that's right. At the White House, President Biden is celebrating 50 million doses being administered, moving closer to his goal of 100 million shots in his first 100 days in office. Well, combine that 50 million with the shots administered during the final days of the President Trump's administration, and that makes over 68 million doses given so far. Well, the New York variant is another variant of concern for many scientists and doctors, just like the current South African, Brazilian, and UK variants.
Right, it seems like there's more of these variants that keep popping up.
That's right.
Well, Johnson&Johnson have been reporting a 94% success rate with its vaccine, stating that it's already tackling the UK variant and reducing hospitalizations, even outperforming the Pfizer vaccine. Now, Oxford vaccine developer Professor Sarah Gilbert spoke with CBS Evening News that a modified vaccine could be rolled out in the U.S. in a matter of months, hopefully by fall of this year. Now, she stated that they have been working on vaccines for variants since late December. She also said that the 12-week gap is better than the U.S.'s 4-week gap between doses because it can reduce the possibility for mutation.
Well, Moderna is beginning tests on its booster shots for the variants that have been recently popping up, targeting particularly the South African variant that has spread to 14 states in the United States so far. Well, data suggests that variant could reduce the protection that people are getting from the current vaccines, so that's the reason drug companies are working on booster shots. So, even if you've already gotten vaccinated, well, like you just said there, you might have to get yet another one.
Well, an acupuncturist, Antonio Whiteley, who recently got his second dose of the Moderna vaccine, who jumped at the opportunity to get vaccinated because he's an essential worker in the healthcare field. Now, Whitley said, "I'm not afraid of it. I trust science. Am I thrilled? No, because after this booster, what if there's another booster after that?" Well, according to Moderna's president, Dr. Stephen Hoge, that's a real possibility. So it might be actually then a booster every couple months or so that they're talking about now, which would mean, as he talked about, getting one after another after another.
That's right, especially since the variants are popping up a lot more frequently. Well, Dr. Hoge said, "I think we hope that this is something that doesn't have to occur for everybody every year in the same way that it currently does. But it's definitely true that we'll ultimately have to provide a booster to the vaccine every year or every few years." Well, Moderna isn't the only drug maker preparing to manufacture boosters. Approval could go through quicker from the FDA due to thousands of trials of the vaccine on record already. So, shorter trials using hundreds, not thousands, of participants could be used to get those boosters out of the door much faster.
Well, Dr. Hoge said, "This doesn't say anything about the effectiveness of the vaccines. This is the evolution of a virus." Now, the vaccines are highly effective. That's been proven in clinical trials. But the virus isn't just going to give up just with one fight. Dr. Hoge said that getting a booster shot could become a yearly occurrence, if not more frequently. But just like getting a flu shot annually, this is a small inconvenience to getting our lives back on track. And as you mentioned there, really it's the virus continuing to mutate, and the virus just doesn't give up.
Right.
It continually tries to outsmart that vaccine that, is trying to attack it.
Yes, because like us, the virus's goal is to survive
Right.
and to propagate. So as things continue to change within the human body and these vaccines come into the human body, that's going to give the virus some more fuel to make changes that are completely off the radar as far as what to expect in regards to lethality and how contagious that they might be. Two things that scientists really are concerned about with these mutations. Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, as he has a little bit more information for us in regards to Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine, and also going to tell us a little bit about the United States' plans in regards to oil in Syria. Larry, what do you have for us?
Though the much-hyped and large-scale rollout of vaccines is still yet to produce any tangible impact with respect to the plague, there are large profits to be made. Thus, the fanfare and false hopes continue. Johnson & Johnson is poised now to have its turn cashing in as the FDA recently issued emergency authorization to its one-shot vaccine. The company says its concoction will require less severe refrigeration, which will enable quicker delivery of its shot to millions. The government is reporting that after a brief lull, coronavirus cases are picking up steam once more, a fact which CDC officials are attributing to mutations of the virus newly come up. The CDC is also cautioning against public complacency and the trends towards relaxing restrictions, while other health officials are issuing serious warnings concerning the third Roman month, which they strongly suspect will be a very difficult time period. Without vigilance, time can cause one to easily forget. Even amid the COVID plague, the tensions in the Middle East and the battle over black gold has not abated. For example, the former U.S. administration made it unmistakably clear that despite competition, America intends to maintain control over Syrian oil fields worth $45 million per month, even if that means they have to fight for it. Here's a timeline showing that stance and other important reminders concerning the events at work in and around the Euphrates.
We don't want to keep soldiers between Syria and Turkey for the next 200 years. They've been fighting for hundreds of years. We're out. But we are leaving soldiers to secure the oil. Now, we may have to fight for the oil. That's okay. Maybe somebody else wants the oil, in which case they have a hell of a fight. But there's massive amounts of oil. Again, somebody else may claim it, but either we'll negotiate a deal with whoever's claiming it, if we think it's fair, or we will militarily stop them very quickly. We have tremendous power in that part of the world. We have tremendous power in that part of the world. We have tremendous power in that part of the world.
Syria says its army positions in the Golan Heights have once again come under fire from Israel. It's the second strike in the area in 2 days.
Israel and Iran are staring each other down tonight across the expanse of Syria. Long simmering hostility flared to life last night as the Israelis blasted Iranian fighters in Syria with their largest airstrike since the 1973 war. Israel says the Iranians started it with a rocket barrage. Special correspondent Jane Ferguson reports from Jerusalem.
The bright dots and streaks in the sky, as shown in Syrian night vision and television video, tell the story of an overnight Mideast confrontation. The pictures purportedly show Israeli airstrikes against Iranian military targets. Damascus also claims they show Syrian air defenses intercepting those Israeli missiles. A spokesman for the Israeli Defense Forces said today they struck dozens of Iranian targets, not just around Damascus, but throughout the southern part of Syria. Israel's defense minister Avigdor Lieberman lauded his country's operation and put Iran on notice.
We, of course, struck almost all the Iranian infrastructure in Syria, and they need to remember this arrogance of theirs. If we get rain, they'll get a flood. I hope that we ended this chapter and that everyone understood.
In Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran crossed a red line, and he warned Syrian President Bashar al-Assad as well.
We are in a continuous campaign, and our policy is clear. We will not allow Iran to establish itself militarily in Syria. Yesterday, I delivered a clear message to Assad. Our action is directed against Iranian targets in Syria. But if the Syrian army acts against us, we will act against it. Whoever attacks us, we will attack them sevenfold, and whoever prepares to attack us, we will act against them first. Whoever attacks us, we will attack them sevenfold, and whoever prepares to attack us, we will act against them first.
The IDF Chief of General Staff affirms Israel is well prepared for an all-out war. The Islamic Republic of Iran warns that the window of opportunity to salvage the 2015 nuclear agreement is not unlimited in time. Israel is well prepared for an all-out war on its northern front. Upon the conclusion of the IDF's military exercise along the border with Lebanon yesterday, dubbed Lightning Storm, Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi held a strategic situation assessment during which he voiced confidence in the readiness of the Northern Command for when the moment of truth arrives.
ואנחנו נמשיך לנהל אסטרטגיה לא דרך הטקטיקה, אלא דרך שיקולים אסטרטגיים. ואם נגיע למצב הזה של המתיחות, אז אנחנו נדע להפעיל את כל השיקולים שחלקם נפרסו פה על המסך, אבל אתם מוכנים למלחמה.
It is interesting to know that the current assessment forecasts that in the event of an all-out war, Israel will have to contend with a number of fronts. The most challenging threat remains the Lebanese-Iranian proxy Hezbollah, which is expected to operate out of both Lebanon and Syria. The threats posed from Syria also include additional Iranian-backed militias, which are expected to assist Hezbollah. However, their capacity to challenge the Israeli military are significantly lower. In tandem, Iran's proxy in Gaza, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, may also attempt to challenge Israel from the Hamas-controlled enclave. Nevertheless, the latter are expected to restrain their involvement for fear of significant Israeli reprisal that will threaten the Islamist Hamas's grip on power. Another threat taken into account in case of an all-out war relates to the Iranian-backed Houthi militia in Yemen, which had recently attained offensive capabilities capable of reaching southern Israel. Well, a senior military official who spoke to TV7 on condition of anonymity stopped short from elaborating on the scope of the IDF's so-called target bank. He stressed, quote, "If Iran drags Israel into war, the regime will have to contend with the full weight of Israel's military might. It will not be spared."
And now, at this point in 2021, Israeli military officials brag of being prepared for an all-out war to their north. The most challenging aspects of the multi-front battle would pit Israel against Hezbollah operating out of Lebanon and Syria, with probable assistance from Iranian insurgents and the Houthi of Yemen as well. And commenting on the matter, a reporter to us spoke under anonymity that if Iran drags Israel into war, the regime will have to contend with the full weight of Israel's military might, and it will not be spared. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Baton Jeff, back to you.
Well, two interesting points that Larry made there. In the Middle East, in and around the Great River Euphrates, and also dealing with the oil.
That's right.
Definitely the oil has always been a very big topic for the United States. Remember President Trump saying that basically I like the oil and he was going to stay there to protect it, so to speak.
That's right.
Well, now let's take a look at how the United States is responding to the recent Iran-backed militia attacks. Just overnight, American military launched an airstrike on a small cluster of buildings inside the Syrian border, now where these militia groups are known to be. Now, the orders for the strikes were given by the new chief in command, President Joe Biden. Now, he says that he's putting Iran on notice. Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said, "We recognize the significance of this operation as the first of its kind under the new administration."
Cell phone video footage shows a few hollowed out structures barely left standing on the Syrian side of its border with Iraq. According to the Pentagon, 2 F-15 Eagle fighter jets dropped 7 500-pound precision-guided bombs on the small complex, which destroyed 9 buildings and caused damage to 2 others. The president has said that Iran can't act with impunity or consequences in the Middle East, and that they must be careful.
Well, the reason for the bombing raid? Well, Mr. Kirby said, "We had information that these structures, this site or this compound, were being used by these groups to facilitate the movement of resources, material, and weaponry into Iraq to conduct the attacks," he said. Now, the attacks he was referring to took place 2 weeks earlier at a coalition base in Erbil, Iraq, where U.S. soldiers and contractors were being housed. Now, fire from those strikes completely destroyed the housing units.
The Pentagon says the U.S. attack was a clear message to Tehran. John Kirby's words were, "That is an unambiguous, clear message to anyone in the region about what the stakes are if you're going to continue to conduct attacks on our people." Well, Secretary of Defense Lloyd L. Austin, or J. Austin, III, told reporters, "We know what we did, and we're confident that target was being used by the same Shia militia that conducted the strikes."
Well, these same Shia militias, supported by Iran, have also launched a rocket attack against the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad and surrounding area, which has been called the Green Zone. Now, the Pentagon says that the strike was proportional to the Iranian strikes and added President Joe Biden's going to protect American military and other personnel, but also, quote, "We have acted in a deliberate manner that aims to de-escalate the overall situation," unquote. Now, defense officials called the strike a one and done as long as Iran and their allies do not pursue anything further. And of course, that would always be a question, because remember, even with the killing of the Iranian general Soleimani, that Iran vowed that they would get revenge, and then we saw them actually strike one of the U.S. bases. So, they're saying that provided Iran doesn't do anything further, we'll stop right here.
Right. Well, the Iranian-made missile attacks 2 weeks ago killed one American contractor and wounded several others, including a U.S. serviceman. According to U.S. sources, the president claims he chose the least lethal option in targeting the militia's frequently used outpost. Initial reports by the Pentagon were the strikes left one militia member dead and 3 others injured. However, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a monitoring group out of London, estimates the death toll to over 20.
Well, as far as senators and congressmen are concerned, the U.S. strikes have received bipartisan support. Now, the House Majority Leader, Mr. Hoyer, said it was a strong act that will surely send a message to Tehran. And according to ABC Morning News, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham was in agreement, saying he, quote, appreciates the Biden administration striking back at these Iranian-backed militia.
Well, finally, we're going to talk about why this region, is so important to the United States. For almost the last 3 decades, the U.S. has had some kind of military operations in and around the Middle East. Well, what that means is for nearly 30 years, the U.S. has been in a state of all-out war or conflict in this region since August of 1990, better known as the start of the Gulf War. The specific point of focus is between Iraq and Turkey, 2 hot zones, but that place right in between them on the map is Syria.
The Syrian conflict has been going on for almost 10 years now, starting back in March of 2011. But let's focus in on the eastern part of Syria along the Iraqi border. Now, the U.S. has taken special interest there, establishing a second base and currently working on a new airport there called Dor el Sor. Now, this airport is very close to the Euphrates River, which runs straight through the province.
Interesting. So what is the importance of this specific province and the largest military installment being built there, you might ask? Well, in a word, it is oil. Yes, oil, as we heard in Larry's report, and there is an abundance of it right under their feet. But there is quite a controversy over the U.S. establishing itself in this region. Critics of the United States encroachment in Syria argue that the United States military and its private contractors are there to take the Syrian oil and export it, thus the need for an airport.
Well, U.S. government officials will say the exact opposite. No, that isn't true. They're really just trying to protect the oil that's there from being attacked or stolen by ISIS, and that's what they're saying. So the real question is, well, who is actually stealing or possibly stealing Syria's oil? And what about the Syrians? Don't they have any say as to what belongs to them? After all, we thought that this was still their country.
That's right. And you don't really hear very much about ISIS anymore at a particular time when they were kind of at their height of attacks. They were doing like $1 to $3 million a day in oil sales as they were taking oil from the various places that they were invading. But the United States has been doing that for much longer, getting the oil from different places and guarding the oil in different places. So there's created a big upheaval in the minds of these governments because they're seeing a foreign government come in and basically tell them they don't have access to their oil. We're going to guard it, we're going to take it, and we're going to use it for our own profit.
Right, and as you said there, it's so interesting because, it's always where the U.S. has mainly their hands there is around these areas that have the oil. Another hotspot is the South China Sea, which, they recently discovered just huge reserves underneath that sea. And of course, China says this is ours, but no, the U.S. wants it. So again, it always seems to be focused around oil. And, another very interesting point is that Yusra Hawkins has been mentioning the oil as he explains Bible prophecy, showing how it ties into actually the actions that we see many of the nations taking in what he calls or refers to as these last days. And it goes along perfectly with what we see taking place right now with these nations, all trying to, have a spot there in getting this oil, and it's leading to war after war and war after war, but it's always in this area that is referred to in and around the great river Euphrates, which is that Middle Eastern area. So we mentioned some of these stories. So if you'd like to learn more about this very interesting topic, please contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them at any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And as we've mentioned before, don't forget the best aid to assist you in studying of your scriptures, the Yisrael Says and the Ask Yisrael programs. You can find those 24 hours a day online, free to use anytime you want, by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another enlightening message from Yisrael Hawkins explaining Bible prophecy as it pertains to the current events we're seeing right now taking place in this world. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.